I prefer the council to speak to whether or not they've got an appetite for tax increase. At a maintenance of effort service budget level, recognizing that we in contract negotiations with all the principal unions, and that we are looking for some cost shifting in essence with regard to benefits, and that we try our best, trying to cost shift as much as we possibly can, and then whatever the outcome of that effort is, obviously there's going to be some new expenses at some level, because we can't control that entirely. Given that, and assuming that we don't lose water on the town side, we don't lose more than 40,000, or the schools are, I don't know if you guys are going to lose the 3%.
Well, that's out of this year's budget for 3%.
It's going to be a challenge to have a 0% tax increase, this year. Very, very difficult. But the cap is at 4.25 under the 3050 legislation. The governor has already said, and this is where he left himself some wiggle room in the proposal they made relative to the motor vehicle reimbursement tax, that the communities, the legislation that he submitted would give empower the communities to fully tax the cars that have been exempted for the last 10 years. So we would have the taxing ability to send out a tax bill for the full value of the vehicle as opposed to the exempted $6,000 per car that we currently are. Is the council agreed in the community that we're willing to work with that somewhat if we lose some of that money? I'll turn it over to Mr.
I think it's premature to throw that out before we go through the budget process and before we get into the negotiations and see where we are with that. To start throwing hard and fast numbers of where we want to be, like a 0%, we're only going to accept the 0%. I think that's realistic. I think it's setting ourselves up, and I'm certainly not going to promise that.
Unrealistic.
It's unrealistic.
Is it realistic?
40 slip there.
I'll weigh in and say the same thing. I'm not going to sit here and tell you my goal for your budget this year is. I don't think that's right. I think it would be difficult if, and that's happened in the past, where you sit on one side, you say, the town, we cut our budget 10%, and the school goes up 10%. And so it's kind of hard to look back to the town employees to say, well, yeah, we did all that, but. I'm also looking not at 0 in the first place, is we're already, if we get the excise tax cut by 440,000, we're not at 0 anymore. We're already up 6.5%. So you add 3 to that, we're now at 10. We add another 2 here, we're at 12. No, I don't have an appetite for a 12% tax increase, not at all.
I was inquiring about process.
I'm not sure how your process is going to work. I'm saying you're asking for the guidance on the budget. Do we have an appetite for a budget increase, or we want 0? I'm saying we're already looking at an increase.
I mean, I don't know what our numbers are going to total to.
Yeah, well,
but if I look at insurance, is probably going up 10%. We have to go out for a new transportation contract. We've been told the anticipated 10% increase. That's a big cost for us. Plus, if we can't park on the island, we've got another chunk of money that we're going to be paying out every year. So we know that our operating expenses are going to be going up, but we've got to look to other places that we can reduce expenses even to balance those. But in the past, or at least last year, what we did was to put together a maintenance of services. Maintain current services for the students we know we have, with special ed costs for the anticipate per child, and we had the money matched and said, all right, to do all of this, it's going to cost X. Then, well, we can't afford X, then start whittling away from there, or do we just go in with the idea that we can't maintain that, and we need to have as our target a certain number. That may be an agreed upon number, or maybe the council's goal. Or
broadly speaking, we know what our cost drivers are. Their wages, health insurance, retirement. Those are the three biggies. If we can go into, and I think as a contract negotiating strategy, it kind of incumbent upon each of us to try to come out with a budget neutral result for next year. So it should be 0% cost impact on the town budget, town school budget, whatever that negotiated agreement is for, at least for the first year. If we're successful in achieving that, then the only other costs that we are going to see are those that are in the other areas of the budget, or the result of loss of revenues. And that piece, obviously, we have no idea at this point, but the revenue side may do to us. But we're largely personnel oriented at this point. Utilities, we increased our fuel budgets a couple of years ago when we were $4 a gallon, so we're fairly healthy there. We increased our electricity budgets because they rose by 25% or 30% a year or so ago. So on all those other items, we're okay on the downside. It's really just shooting for that wage and benefit piece, and then see what happens on the revenue side, whether or not we're significantly harmed or not. And that, on our end, will determine where we stand relative to tax burden, new tax burden for the town. And I assume schools, in a similar position. But if we can get that zero budget neutral impact on the kind of bargaining for next year, that will put us in a good position. And then it's really just what the legislature does to us as far as revenues is concerned.
Well, it also has to do with not just with, I agree with the 0%, if we can get that in through the contract for this particular year, but there are still other costs that are still going to be going up. I mean, if we get...
Yours is more, you have variables that we don't.
Right. I just want everybody to understand that, when somebody's saying 0%, I don't want taxpayers to think that they're 0%.
The impact of the contract.
Right, I know, but I keep hearing the number 0.
Yeah.
And I'm more heartened by Bill's, I'm not thinking 12% either.
But I know what you're throwing out. I'm saying, 6.5, 3.5. I'm like, okay, another 8%. It's like, okay.
Right, and I mean, I think the whole idea here is that, the pencil gets even sharper this year. I thought it was pretty sharp last year in terms of, and, I think on the school side, the maintenance of services is, right now, we think we have pretty decent schools going on here, and we'd kind of like to maintain that concept. But there are going to be costs that are going to go up, and that I think that we're going to do our due diligence in terms of the teacher contract is coming up, and, addressing those three major drivers you're talking about.
But obviously, it seems like we should always have in mind what it's going to cost us to maintain the services that we're now providing. Good education for the kids, whatever, all the various things we're doing for the town. And of course, you brought up that term, appetite for a tax increase. None of us have an appetite for a tax increase.
I got an appetite for pizza, but not for...
Many of us, but even if you don't have an appetite, you still have to eat a couple times a day to maintain your services. So it's not an appetite necessarily, but it's always got to be kept in mind. But it seems like the base would be, which I think really is where Bruce is coming from, and his next step is to determine where the driving factors are. But the real thing is how do we maintain our services, both school and town, and at the same, and then find out what it's going to cost us, and then we may all, both school and town, come to a situation where we can't maintain certain services, and then we have to do things we don't want to do, but or we have to raise taxes. And of course, we're being filmed, so none of us will say we have an appetite for taxes.
That's right, Sam.
Contingency planning to various degrees.